Christmas greetings. My name is David Corbin, and thanks for joining us on Just Between Sundays. This is a weekly commentary on a topic of interest. This week's commentary is entitled Science and the Birth of Jesus. Luke reports that the birth of Jesus happened when Quirinius was governor of Syria. For years, some scholars questioned the accuracy of that statement. However, we now have evidence that Quirinius was governor of Syria around 7 BC. This assertion is based on an inscription found in Antioch that credits that statement to Quirinius. As a result of this discovery, it is now believed that Quirinius served as governor twice, once in 7 BC and again 13 years later. This historical detail helps verify the accuracy of Luke's account of the timing of the birth of Jesus. Again, Matthew and Luke refer to Nazareth as the place from which Joseph and Mary left for Bethlehem. Did you know that for many years the existence of Nazareth was questioned? Doubters contended that there was no archaeological evidence to support its existence in the first century. In light of that skepticism, the reliability of the biblical text, particularly the accounts of Jesus' birth and upbringing, was called into question. René Salem was a case in point. In his book, The Myth of Nazareth, the invented town of Jesus, he argued that Nazareth didn't exist until the 2nd century, after Jesus was born. For years, the archaeological evidence for this first century Nazareth was limited. As is often the case, however, archaeological finds in recent years have vindicated the biblical record with numerous first century discoveries. Tombs with fragments of bones, bone boxes, and have now been exhumed in Nazareth, indicating a Jewish presence there in the 1st century. Storage pits and cisterns from the time of Jesus have been discovered. Archaeologists contend that about, 350 persons may have lived in Nazareth when Jesus lived there. Today, more than 50,000 persons live in Nazareth. Again, archaeology supported the biblical text. In May of 2012, the Israel Antiquities Authority announced the discovery of a tiny clay seal which mentions Bethlehem, the city of David, and the birthplace of Jesus. The report said the first ancient artifact constituting tangible evidence of the existence of the city of Bethlehem was recently discovered in Jerusalem. The 3 lines of ancient Hebrew script stamped on the clay seal read, "From the town of Bethlehem to the King." However, I would be the first to argue or to agree that archaeology does not prove that the Bible is true. Archaeology is highly useful because it supplies cultural and material remains that provide the background for accurately interpreting the Bible. Archaeology then has illuminated and verified the Bible in numerous ways. The interpreter finds in archaeology a good friend for understanding and substantiating Scripture. One's confidence can be enhanced where historical events support the truths of Scripture. In his book, What Means These Stories?, Yale professor of archaeology Millard Burrows makes the point that archaeological work has unquestionably strengthened confidence in the reliability of the scriptural account. More than one archaeologist has found his respect for the Bible increased by the experience of excavation in Palestine. Personally, my faith is strengthened whenever I read the reports of Jesus' birth as told by Matthew and Luke. Aside from theological matters such as Jesus' messianic identity, I believe the events occurred Nazareth, Jerusalem, and Bethlehem actually existed in the first century. Quirinius, Herod, and Caesar Augustus were actual political leaders. Historical details like these undermine notions of myth and fiction and legend. Instead, historical details deal with reality and state what actually happened. I strongly recommend that you read the first 2 chapters in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke this Christmas. You will see how the writers tell their stories to convince their audiences that the birth of Jesus and the events surrounding it actually happened. However, just as the writers were convinced they were reporting what actually happened, they were equally convinced that someone outside our human experience played a significant role in the birth of Jesus. Paul contended that the person who played that bigger role was God. This is how he described it in Galatians chapter 4. But when the time had fully come, God sent his Son, Jesus, born of a woman. This is a good reason to remember that archaeology as a science verifies the story of the birth of God's Son. Whereas archaeology helps affirm the circumstances surrounding the coming of Jesus, it cannot establish the purpose of his coming. As his name implies, Jesus was born to save. Thankfully, his ability to save is still evident. Have you found this to be true in your life?